Can you keep a secret?
Changing hearts and minds.
Changing hearts and minds.
Changing hearts and minds.
Changing hearts and minds. Changing hearts and minds.
Changing hearts and minds.
Changing hearts and minds.
Welcome to Change Your POV podcast. You're listening to Changing Hearts and Minds, a show about reviving the warrior spirit and remembering the past to improve our future. I'm your host, Jeff Adamick. Let's get this party started.
Ladies and gentlemen, am I totally screwed or what? You're funny.
I want to discuss all this behavior.
Let me out of here!
Welcome to Changing Hearts and Minds podcast. I am your host, Jeff Adamick. All right, guys, so what's been going on lately is I have been asking a lot of the people out there to give me their ideas and their decisions of what they want shows to be about. And I get all these topics that people want me to do, and some of these topics just don't have enough information out there for me to get an entire show done on them. So what I've decided to do is I decided to take a couple of these topics that are really kind of cool topics in and of themselves and throw them together in kind of like a potpourri miscellaneous episode. And we'll probably have more and more of these as we go along. But these episodes are going to be as you see in the title, it is trivia and bullshit. Now because of the censors and iTunes and all that other stuff, it'll say trivia and bullcrap. But we all know that it's trivia and bullshit. Today I have a bunch of people guests. This is by far next to the authors that I had on from Tactical 16. This is the largest host and guest appearance I've ever had. I've got 4 people in here, including myself. So there's myself, Jeff Adamick. But also there is frequent guest host Nick Giglio. Nick Giglio works in the IT industry. He has no military background, but he's always been a good guest on here. Let's welcome back Nick. Hey, Nick. Hey, welcome back, buddy.
Yeah. How's it going, Jeff?
Thanks, bud. Thanks for coming out here on short notice. Also, we have Jeremy Passmore. Jeremy Passmore was a U.S. Marine Corps Jarhead for 4 years. Jarhead. He was a radio operator 0621, and that 0621 is about all the numbers and letters that he could put together at one time because he was a Marine. Let's welcome to the show, Jeremy. Jeremy, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on the show. I've actually heard a lot of the shows, and I really enjoy them.
Yeah, don't hurt yourself, buddy. Don't hurt yourself thinking too hard. We don't want you to have any kind of aneurysms or anything like that. And finally, we have as our final guest a really, really good close friend of mine. I've known this guy for years. He served with me in special operations. Although he wasn't a Green Beret, he was a truck driver. Is that right, Lou?
Yeah.
Lou was a truck driver. So truck driving sucks, and Lou knows it. Lou Dunn spent how many years? Oh, go ahead. Lou, why don't you just tell everyone?
Almost 15 years in a support role. I'd say about 6. About 6 years of that was supporting special ops, and enjoyed every minute of it. I wish I could have spent my whole career in that, supporting special ops and special operations all over the world. Yeah, I was a truck driver. Plus, I jumped out of planes, and I'm big as hell.
Yeah, he is big as hell. He's a big boy.
So it was always fun.
So what you guys will notice is Lou's last name is Dunn, and because of how big he is, he's got the nickname 1 Ton Dunn. And hey, that's so you know, Jeremy, ton is a word for heavy, used by the rest of the people in the world who actually use 10% of their brains, other than the 4% that Marines use.
Thanks for clearing that one up.
Since you're a Marine, you're going to get a lot of shit in this show because, we still love you, but we have that good hate for you also.
Yeah, so all the fans out there who are Marines, you guys know we love you guys to death. We love all of our Marines and our Navy, Air Force. We like you guys because every time we got to go to war, you guys fly us there. So I'm just joking. We love you guys in the Air Force too. It's those shallow water Navy guys. What is that? The guys who just like hang around in the shallow waters. Oh, the Coast Guard, yeah. Those guys. Those guys who like to jump around from being Department of Defense to Department of Transportation to Department of Homeland Security. You know who you are. You guys like to pretend that you're in armed service, but that's all right. It's all cool. Let's just jump right into it. We're going to have 3 separate topics today that we're going to cover, and as you probably see it inside the show, I mean, I really love history, obviously, since I hosted military history, and specifically a trivia-based history info. So we're just going to throw out some cool trivia related to the military. This is info that is cool, but not enough to get its own full show, as I said before. This will be the first of a series of future episodes with this type of stuff, and probably with a group of people like I have now on the show with me. Welcome to Trivia and Bullshit, or what will be called on the show page to avoid censorship issues, Trivia and Bullcrap. So first, we're going to turn to Jeremy, and we're going to ask him to give us some cool trivia about his former branch of service, the U.S. Marine Corps. So, Jeremy, go ahead, buddy. The floor is yours.
The United States Marine Corps, also referred to as the United States Marines, is a branch of the United States Armed Forces responsible for conducting amphibious operations with the United States Navy. The U.S. Marine Corps is one of the 4 armed service branches in the United States Department of Defense and one of the 7 uniformed services of the United States.
So 7 uniformed services in the United States. Anybody name the rest of them?
Are we considering the Coast Guard?
No. Yeah, we have to consider the Coast Guard one of them. So we've got, and this is not a gotcha question. I just noticed that 7. So we've got the U.S. Army,
the Navy,
the Marine Corps, the Air Force, the Coast Guard. That's 5. So there's 2 out there that are unnamed.
You can keep on looking at me, but I can't even remember my kid's name. So
yeah, I know that. Well, I'm only looking at you because you're the only one here that I think might know the answer. It's a really good question. 7 branches of service. We're going to go to the computer and see if Nick Giglio can pull up what the seventh branch are. And I know that right now there's somebody at home screaming at the radio, going, it's this. And I know there's some kind of armed service that's medical based out of Atlanta. It might be part of the CDC, I think. But I'm sure that Nick's looking it up right now. Nick, what do you got? What are the other 2 branches that we're missing?
So you got the United States Public Health Service Commission Corps.
Okay.
And you got the NOAA Commissioned Officer Corps.
Oh, how could we have forgotten?
NOAA. Yeah, those are the guys. Well, I mean, I would always have thought that those guys were just branches of other stuff. I didn't know they were armed services.
Yeah, I'm going to remember this forever now.
Yeah.
You're not.
No, really.
No, he'll probably forget it within 10 minutes of walking out of here. Go ahead, Nick. I didn't mean to steal your thunder, buddy. Nick or Jeremy, you guys have become one and the same.
The United States Marine Corps actually traces its root back to the Continental Marines of the American Revolutionary War. The Marine Corps was formed by Captain Samuel Nicholas by resolution of the Second Continental Congress on November 10th of 1775.
Yeah, where was it at, though? Where was the actual Marine Corps formed at?
The Marine Corps was born on November 10th, 1775 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in Tun Tavern.
Tun Tavern.
Tun Tavern was erected.
Erected,
yeah.
Marines. Erected.
Typical Marine.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It rhymes with erection, yeah.
Which actually goes to a little bit of trivia history we're going to go into later on.
Oh.
Yeah.
The tavern was erected in 1668.
How about 1686?
Oh.
We'll try that date.
1686 at the intersection of King Street and Tun Alley by a settler Joshua Carpenter, brother of Samuel Carpenter, a Quaker merchant who made a fortune trading in Barbados.
So a Quaker, a non-violent person, created the Marine Corps, the most violent of all violence.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, okay.
They say opposites attract.
Yeah, they do say that, but they don't mean it, man. You don't know that.
Okay.
Keep going.
Joshua Carpenter built the tavern on Caraway that led to the Carpenter's Wharf. The tavern was named from the Old English word tun, meaning barrel or keg of beer.
Mm-hmm.
In 1740, the restaurant changed its name to Peggy's Mullins Red Hot Beef Steak Club.
All right, I want to stop right there just for a minute. Red Hot Beef Steak Club. Nick, didn't you find something online about the Marine Corps, about the Army doing a study? I want you to go ahead and bring this up right now.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting, Jeremy. I was doing a little research on Tun Tavern myself. And
Red Hot Beef Steak Club. Just want to put that out before you say this. Go ahead. What was the information you found out?
I found an article that says that the original nature of the Tun Tavern was as a gay bar.
What?
Yeah. I have this quote from Army Sergeant First Class Craig Mangus. The find has confirmed what many of us have suspected for years. It's apparent regarding the nature of current Marines that they've evolved from some sort of ultra-queer genome.
I'm going to use that one from now on.
Ultra-queer genome? Didn't they dig up the the outhouse?
Yep.
They said something about the outhouse I thought was interesting. Go ahead and tell us what they said about the outhouse.
I believe the quote was, "That was some of the gayest shit I've ever seen."
Now, guys, we obviously are reading something that was like an onion-based, article. It wasn't something that was real. It was meant to dig into our Marine friends. But it's so funny that the Marine Corps Tun Tavern was named Peggy Mullen's Red Hot Beef Steak Club, and then the Army comes up with it was based on gay, and that's some of the gayest shit I've ever seen. So, Jeremy, we're just messing with you, buddy, and talk about what led up to to the Marines and Tun Tavern actually being connected. What was the actual what was the stuff that happened around there? As you're in your research that you found.
November 10th is the day that the Second Continental Congress approved the actual Marine Corps being a thing. Okay, and then it appointed Captain Samuel Nicholas to be the first commandant of the Marine Corps, basically. He was the first ever commissioned officer first ever Marine commissioned officer. Tun Tavern actually housed a lot of other organizations. Tun Tavern hosted the first meeting of a number of organizations in 1720. The first meeting of the St. George Society, a charitable organization found to assist needy Englishmen arriving to the new colony, predecessor of today's Sons of Society of St. George.
Yeah, in 1732, the tavern also hosted the first meetings of St. John's Lodge No. 1 and the Grand Lodge of the Masonic Temple. We can go into long and talk about the history of the United States and how the Masons were involved with it all the way through to modern times. The Tun Tavern was also a significant meeting place for other groups and actual individuals. Like in 1756, Benjamin Franklin used the inn as a recruitment gathering point for the Pennsylvania militia as it prepared to fight the Native American uprisings. That's 1756. So this is back into the French and Indian War time period. The tavern later hosted meetings of George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and the Continental Congress. And Jeremy, according to tradition, what does the tradition actually state about Tun Tavern officially?
According to the tradition, Tun Tavern was where the United States Marine Corps held their first recruiting drive on November 10th of 1775. The Second Continental Congress commissioned the innkeeper, a former Quaker, Samuel Nicholas, to raise 2 battalions of Marines in Philadelphia. The tavern's manager, Robert Mullen, was the chief Marine recruiter. Though legend places its first recruiting post at Tun Tavern, historian Edwin Simmons surmises that it was more likely a tavern owned by Nicholas's family. The First Continental Marine Company was comprised of 100 Rhode Islanders. Each year on November 10th, U.S. Marines worldwide toast the memory of this colonial inn as the official birthplace of their service branch. The earliest Marines were deployed aboard Continental Congress Navy vessels as sharpshooters because they were typically recruited as outstanding marksmen.
Yeah, after the War for Independence ended, there was no plan to have an established and full-time professional military. For those of you who know a lot about history, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, they were not big fans of having an established military service. They didn't have one. They had the citizen soldiers, the National Guard guys were still there, the militias, but there was no full-time paid military at all. So when Thomas Jefferson became president in 1801, he planned to prioritize reducing the national debt. The U.S. wasn't at war, and the Treasury never had much money to begin with, so he didn't see a point in paying for a military. His party assumed that he wouldn't try to rebuild the Navy, and they were right. He had no intention to. One of President John Adams' last acts as predecessor was to sell most of its ships to an eager commercial market. So all these wartime ships that the U.S. had from the Revolutionary War were sold off. Unfortunately, 4 Muslim states on the Barbary coast of North Africa had a history of kidnapping the crews of American military and merchant vessels and holding them for ransom. To stop these abuses, the pirates demanded an annual lump sum in advance, like insurance or like pressured crime. Europeans paid for it, and the Continental Congress and the administration of Washington and Adams followed their example. Adams' vice president, Jefferson, was opposed to all this act. So William Eaton and First Lieutenant Presley O'Banion led 8 Marines and 500 merchants in an effort to capture Tripoli. Though they only reached Derna, the action in Tripoli has been immortalized in the Marines' hymn and the Mameluki sword carried by the Marine officers. So at this point right now, we are going to have Jeremy sing the Marine Corps hymn.
From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we find our...
Stop it.
Okay.
Stop it.
I know the whole thing.
I know you do. I just actually didn't think you would go for it that quick.
Well, you know.
Yeah, he was ready.
Yeah, he was ready to go right into it, huh?
So now just some facts about the traditions and customs of the Marines. So the Marines hymn that Jeremy just so kindly sang for us dates back to the 19th century and is the oldest official song in the United States Armed Forces. The Marine motto, Semper Fidelis, means always faithful in Latin, often appearing as Semper Fi. The Marine Corps emblem is the eagle, globe, and anchor, sometimes abbreviated EGA. It was adopted in 1868. The Marine Corps seal includes the emblem also found on the flag of the United States Marine Corps and establishes scarlet and gold as the official colors. There are two styles of swords worn by Marines. The officer's Mameluke sword, similar to the Persian Shamshir, presented to Lieutenant Presley O'Bannon after the Battle of Derna, and the Marine NCO sword. Also, the Marine Corps birthday is celebrated every year on the 10th of November. They have a cake cutting ceremony where the first slice of cake is given to the oldest Marine present, who in turn hands it off to the youngest Marine present.
And then they have a giant cake fight where they smash each other in the face with cakes like the Three Stooges. So this is the big one that I wanted to talk about. And we actually, guys, you didn't hear it. Last week's guest, Nick Lopper, just walked into the room, and I wanted him in here to hear this specific part. Talk to me about this last part. You tell us, Jeremy, because this is important. What do you call a Marine after they're no longer in the Marine Corps? Talk about it. Tell us.
Once a Marine, always a Marine. Basically, once you're in the Brotherhood, or the gun club, as a lot of Marines like to call it, you're always in. You always help your brothers out through anything that you can help them out with. It's basically a brotherhood that separates us from the other branches.
I don't know.
I don't want to hear it.
I
don't want to hear it.
I kind of am feeling like it.
You just disgraced the whole origins of the Marine Corps.
I disgraced it? It's your origins, buddy. I mean, that's the gayest shit I've ever seen. So, Jeremy, what are some of the other nicknames that you Marines actually walk around with, and what's a little bit of their history?
Marines have several generic nicknames. Devil Dog, it's often disputed. It was given to the Marines after the Battle of Belleau Wood. It kind of fits now because the Marine Corps mascot is an English Bulldog. It's often disputed, though, because a lot of historians and military historians don't actually believe that the Germans actually called the Marines of Belleau Wood. The German term would be Teufelhunden. They don't recognize that. But in the Marine Corps, it's a big thing. It's pretty much the gospel.
What about Leatherneck? Where's Leatherneck come from?
Leatherneck refers to the leather collar formerly a part of the Marine Corps uniform during the Revolutionary War period.
What was the purpose of it?
What I know, the purpose is that it keeps you from getting stabbed in the neck.
Right. Now we're going to go to the one that's the real, twisted knife in the side of the Marines, the term jarhead. So Marines are known to cut their hair in a particular style that is referred to as a high and tight, and the result is a head that looks like a jar, hence jarhead. Around 1900, the word jarren, members of the U.S. Navy began using the word jarren as a jocular derogatory reference to the U.S. Marines. Instead of being insulted, the Marines loved it. The term became common by World War I and has been extensively used since that, and jarren has kind of morphed into jarhead. So jarhead, for roughly 50 years, soldiers had little luck in their efforts to insult Marines by calling them jarrens because the Marines just don't understand that word. So during World War II, sailors began referring to Marines as jarheads. Presumably, the high collar on the Marines' dress blue uniform made a Marine's head look like it was sticking out of the top of a jar, a mason jar specifically, and Marines were not insulted. Instead, they embraced this new moniker as a term of utmost respect, and they obviously just don't get it because I couldn't join the Marines because my head wouldn't fit in the jar, and I don't think neither would lose. No. So, Jeremy, last bit of info on the Marines before I shut you up for the rest of this show with your damn Marine bullshit. Go ahead and talk to us about some of these other stuff.
Soldiers of the Sea, a traditional and functional term for Marines, dating back to the British in the 1600s. Oorah is common among Marines, being similar to the function and purpose of the Army and Air Force hoo-ah and the Navy hoo-yah cries. Many possible meanings have been offered for the term. Improvise, adapt, and overcome has been adapted in many units today.
Yeah, it's kind of like their mantra. They'll adapt, overcome, blah blah blah.
That's because we have to use all the hand-me-downs from the Army.
Well, no. You have to adapt and overcome the fact that your heads are. This show was turned into a spectator event, much by my own design, to make Jeremy feel even more uncomfortable. As you can hear him in the show, I have got Nick Lopper. Go ahead, Nick. Say hi.
Hi.
All right. I've also got Emily.
Hello.
And I've got Madison. And now I'm going to get all them to share this show so that everyone else can hear this show. So what we just went over with the Marine stuff is just a broad stroke of the paintbrush of the interesting history of the Marines. They're fully deserving of a full show, and they will get one. But this individual info is worth some time today. Before we move on to the next subject, I just really real quick wanted to get a little bit of the guest advice on what Marine shows or movies that if you haven't read or seen anything about the Marines that they should watch. So, Jeremy, what is your suggestion for a movie about the Marine Corps?
I personally like Full Metal Jacket just because you can't beat Gunny Army. And it's just overall the most realistic experience of Marine Corps boot camp.
Is it really?
Well, I mean,
most Marines then blow their own brains out.
Okay. Well, to that
is that realistic?
It doesn't go to that extent.
Anyone else, Lou?
What?
Is it realistic to think that the Marines just blow their brains out after basic training or after boot camp? Excuse me.
Actually, he did it in boot camp.
They're going to make space because then you know.
All right, Nick. What is your pick for the movie?
My choice was A Few Good Men. Now it doesn't show much combat-wise, but
or
it
any
does, or any at all. But it describes it, and it's all about a military trial of two Marines accused of killing another Marine.
Yeah, and they did it. They killed him.
They did kill him.
They did kill him. They pretty much killed him. But they killed him on the orders of
Colonel Jessup.
Colonel Jessup, yeah. So my choice is going to be Heartbreak Ridge. My choice for Heartbreak Ridge is twofold. One, because it was originally a movie about the United States Army Rangers, but the Rangers refused to allow the Rangers to be depicted in the manner that the Marines are depicted in the beginning of the movie as a bunch of slack-jawed, lazy sons of bitches. So the Marine Corps were like, sure, you can make the movie about us. And the entire story that occurs in there is actually a true story that happened during the invasion of Grenada, where they actually had to call and request for fire through a phone line using somebody's calling card. But it was the actual Rangers that happened with, not the actual Marine Corps. That and, Gunny Highway, man, you can't go wrong with Gunny Highway. So, Lou, what is your choice?
Well, honestly, I don't like any of them. I was raised by a Marine, but I mean, there's been a few good ones. Obviously, the ones that were named: Full Metal Jacket, A Few Good Men, Heartbreak Ridge. I do like the HBO show The Pacific. It basically goes over World War II with the Marines, and I guess I'm gonna sound like a Marine here, but it was based in the Pacific.
Yeah.
So
pretty obvious.
Pretty good.
Also, I do want to say that I think the Pacific is probably the most accurate depiction of combat during World War II in the Pacific theater. It really does bring a lot of light to the hardship and struggles that the Marines went through, and it was harsh on them, and they took it like men. We joke around a lot about the Marines and how their whole job is to just die, and so that they can fill up the beaches with bodies, so I don't get my feet wet when I walk in behind them to actually defeat the enemy. But I will say that I did want to be a Marine, but not because of the U.S. Marines as they are now, but because of Space Marines. I saw the movie Aliens, and that made me want to join the Marine Corps. Since Nick wasn't allowed to use the Aliens as his choice for a Marine movie, I'm not going to go on to it or much more length than that. So, real quick before we move on, guests, everyone having a good time? Mm-hmm. Yeah. See, this is a great time. We're going to have more of these going on. Maybe I'll get some more people in here for stuff. What's our next subject and our next trivia stuff that we're going to talk about?
Okay, here's your trivia question, Jeff. How many presidents actually served as generals in the military before being elected as president?
Before I did the research, my answer probably would have been, honest to God, my answer probably would have been 4. That would have been 4. And the 4 I would have thought about was obviously Washington, Grant, Jackson, and Eisenhower. But I know now, after doing my research, that I'm wrong. So go ahead, Nick, illuminate me. How many actual U.S. presidents did serve as generals?
I would have just said all the good ones.
Dude, damn right. Damn Skippy.
It turns out that 12 of our presidents have actually been generals. You did better than me because I would have been able to name one of them.
You wouldn't have been able to name George Washington?
That's the only one.
Oh, okay. You would only name one. And we're not going to go deep into it, real deep into it. But let's go through some of them. Nick, go ahead and talk. We're going to go in order. Let's go chronologically.
Yeah, the first one, I just mentioned him. The most obvious one is George Washington. He was born February 22nd, 1732, and he died December 14th, 1799. Obviously, he was the first president of the United States. He served in both the British Army and the Continental Army. The British in 1752 through 1758, and the Continental Army through 1775 through 1783.
And let's be honest, his terms of service in the British military is what got him the job as the Continental Army commander, because he was such a good... He wasn't born in Europe. He was born in Virginia. So he wasn't allowed to be a full-fledged member of the British military, but he was considered a colonial commander of the colonial militia, which was still part of the British.
Yeah. And he did reach 5-star general rank. Next, we'll go with Andrew Jackson. He was actually the 7th president of the United States. He was born on March 15th, 1767. He died June 8th, 1845. He actually reached 2-star general rank in the military.
One thing I always liked about Jackson was he actually joined at 14 in the Revolution, being that he fought in the War of 1812 is where he became a general. But he fought in the Revolution, was actually captured by the British, and was well known to have been beaten and scarred because he refused to shine a British soldier's shoes when he was in captivity. So he was also known to be the hero of New Orleans, as everyone's always heard that. In 1814, we took a little trip with the Colonel Jackson down the mighty Mississippi. It's not as good as Jeremy's singing of the Marine Corps hymn, but that was the other thing that Andrew Jackson was well known for, was the Battle of New Orleans and being the hero of the Battle of New Orleans.
There are a lot of better songs in the Marine Corps. Yeah.
That's right. There certainly is. Go ahead, Nick.
Next, we have William Henry Harrison. He was the 9th President of the United States. He was born February 9th, 1773, and died April 4th, 1841. He served from 1791 through 1798, and also again 1811 through 1814. He reached a 2-star general rank, and he is best known for his defeat of the Shawnee in the Battle of Tippecanoe. After that, we have Zachary Taylor. He was the 12th President of the United States. He was born November 24th, 1784. He died July 9th of 1850. He was a career soldier. He fought in nearly every American conflict that he was able to until he became president.
Yeah, this guy was a monster as far as like military was concerned. I think up until Grant later on, which we'll go over, this guy may have been like the most soldiering soldier of all the guys that we have on our list. Next,
the next president we have is the 14th president of the United States, Franklin Pierce. He was born November 23rd of 1804, and he died October 8th of 1869. He served from 1831 to 1847 in the U.S. Army Militia, and then in the actual Army from 1847 to 1848. And he was actually a 1-star general rank.
Going up until, what was that, the Spanish-American War? The Mexican-American War?
Yeah.
Mexican-American War. For the next group of presidents who were generals, they all come from one war. And it seems to be that, most of it. And that is the Civil War. You'll notice that there are absolutely 0 Confederate generals on this list. And the reason why is because, A, they lost, and B, and I know I'm going to get hate mail about this, guys, but they had no business becoming the President of the United States because they were not, I'm not going to say traitors. They were rebels to the Union. I think had General Lee not gone the way that he went, he probably would have been one of these presidents. He was very well liked. But let's go through the Civil War generals. And a lot of people think Grant would have been the first, but he was not. Andrew Johnson was actually the first Civil War general who became a president. He was the 17th president of the United States, born December 29th, 1808, died July 31st, 1875. He served in the U.S. Army from 1862 to 1865, so not very long. He was a brigadier, 1-star general. At the outbreak of the Civil War, Johnson was representing his home state of Tennessee as a U.S. senator. Johnson was pro-slavery, but disagreed 100% with secession. And when Tennessee seceded, Johnson stayed loyal to the Union, becoming the only Southern senator to keep his seat in Congress. Johnson's property was confiscated, and his family left Tennessee, and in the North, his courageous act garnered very popular public support. During the war, he was made the military governor of Tennessee, which is how he earned his rank, but it is well known that he did not fight. He served as a general only in holding a position and governorship over the state of Tennessee. The next president was Ulysses S. Grant, born April 27, 1822, and died July 23, 1885. The 18th president of the United States. He served in the U.S. Army from 1839 to 1854. Initially, he was kicked out of service for alcohol-related incidents when he was stationed in Oregon. And then from 1861 to 1869, where he achieved the rank of General of the Army, 4-star, and he was only the second person to reach the rank of General of the Armies. The first one was Washington, and Grant was the second. United States Army. Grant's battlefield experience began in the Mexican-American War, where he was served under General Zachary Taylor and also under General Robert E. Lee. And after Lee's surrender, Grant became one of the most admired men in the Union, also admired by his actual enemy on the battlefield, General Lee himself. He fought in the Mexican-American War, where he received awards for being for gallantry and for valor, and in the American Civil War, obviously. And his American Civil War campaigns include Vicksburg, Chattanooga, the Overland Campaign, Petersburg, the Appomattox. Next one was Rutherford B. Hayes, born October 4th, 1822, and died January 17th, 1893. He was the 19th president of the United States, so the third in a row who was a general. He served in the U.S. Army from 1861 to 1865 and was a brigadier general, 1-star. He was a brevet major general, so he got promoted to 2-star by a brevet promotion. And Lou, what is a brevet promotion?
So it's when a person gets promoted for valorous acts.
One of the things about Rutherford B. Hayes is this dude was wounded 5 times. And, wounded in the Civil War wasn't like I cut my nail, I got a hangnail. I mean, we're talking about severely wounded. This guy was wounded 5 times. He pretty much the entire campaign battles during 1864, he took part in all of them. Next was the 20th President of the United States, James A. Garfield, who was actually orange with furry head, and he loved lasagna. No, I'm kidding. He was born November 19th, 1831, died September 19th, 1881. 20th President of the United States, served in the U.S. Army from 1861 to 1863. He was a Major General, 2-star, and at the age of 30, Garfield became a Major General, one of the youngest officers in the Civil War to hold the rank, and to this day still one of the youngest men in history of the United States military to ever hold the rank of General. The next is the 21st President, which is Chester A. Arthur. He was born October 5th, 1829, died November 18th, 1886, served in the Army from 1857 to 1863. He was a Brigadier General 1-star. And during the Civil War, Chester A. Arthur served as Quartermaster General of the state of New York. He was appointed to this position by the New York governor, and Quartermaster General Arthur was in charge of provisioning and housing New York's troops. By 1863, Arthur hadn't fired a shot on the battlefield. So much like Johnson, who never fired a shot, neither had Chester A. Arthur. Finally, the 23rd President, there was a skip. So we went from 21st, then there was a non-general in there, and then the 23rd President was Benjamin Harrison, who was born August 20th, 1833, and died March 13th, 1901. He was a descendant of the 9th President of the United States, William Henry Harrison. He served in the Army from 1862 to 1865. He was a colonel, but he was, again, like Lou said, he was a brevet brigadier general. And on January 23rd, 1865, President Lincoln nominated Harrison to the grade of brevet brigadier general of volunteers to rank from that date, and the Senate confirmed his nomination on February 14th, 1865. In the Battle of Resaca-Cassville, New Hope, Lost Mountain, Kennesaw Mountain, he was well known to be very, very gallant and brave and did a lot of valorous acts. So our last president who was a general, I'm gonna let Lou tell us who that was.
Well, before I even speak on that, I mean, this is just a point that's been proven moreover all throughout my civilian career, is that military leaders and military NCOs, and I do say military even though I give the Marine crap, military are some of the best leaders that I've known. So this isn't surprising. Mine I'm going over is Dwight D. Eisenhower. Born October 14th, 1890. Died March 28, 1969. 34th President of the United States, served in the Army 1915 to 1953 and 1961 to 1969.
Obviously had a break after World War I. Yeah, he got out after World War I, then got back in for World War II.
That's because he has some balls.
Yes, and he's got the one rank, I think, which is pretty much trumps every other rank, and that's that one right there underneath his 5-star General Command.
Yep, Supreme Allied Commander.
And this man was the commander of every army during World War II that was on the Allied side.
Like Zachary Taylor, Ulysses S. Grant, Eisenhower was a career military man who never held a political office before becoming president. That's because we can do anything we want to.
That's right.
Just the way it is.
Hoorah. Or hooah.
Yeah, you said the wrong one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been around the Marine all afternoon. I kind of feel stupider, but it's okay.
Yeah, you said stupider, too.
Yeah, well, because I've been around a Marine all day.
Seized upon his national popularity as a World War II hero, the Republican Party nominated Eisenhower as candidate for presidential election in 1952. Ike, as some called him, defeated Adlai Stevenson in a landslide 442 to 89 of electoral votes. Oh, that sounds familiar, electoral votes. Mm-hmm. I think we dealt with those recently.
We deal with them every 4 years.
Yeah. Then in 1956, the popular incumbent president once again defeated Stevenson in another landslide, winning 457 to 73.
Yeah, he kind of went down, huh?
Yeah.
Didn't do so well afterwards.
Yeah.
So, real quick, before we go on, ladies, over there in the corner, of the presidents we just named, and you guys will have to speak up a little bit, which one sounds the most impressive? The answer is Grant, as we all know. Ulysses S. Grant is the most impressive of them all. No, go ahead. Which one do you find most impressive? Don't cover your mouth up. We're generals? Can't hear you. No? What about you, Madison? Did you know all those presidents were generals? Did you learn something today? Yeah. Did I force you to come in here? Yeah. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. All right, guys. Finally, as we wrap it up here, we got about 10 minutes left. I want to talk about a legend in the U.S. Army Special Operations community that actually was never a member of the U.S. military, and that is Robert Rogers. He was never a member of the U.S. Army or the U.S. military at all. Colonel Robert Rogers was born on 7 November 1731 and died 18 May 1795. He was an American colonial frontiersman, served in the British Army during both the French and Indian Wars and the American Revolution. During the French and Indian Wars, Rogers raised and commanded the famous Rogers Rangers, trained for raiding and close combat behind enemy lines, and pretty much led the way for unconventional warfare and tactics of the time. Robert Rogers was born to Irish immigrants, James and Mary McFatridge Rogers, on 7 November 1731 in Methuen, a small town in northern Massachusetts. In 1739, when Rogers was 8 years old, his family relocated to the Great Meadow District of New Hampshire, near present-day Concord, where James founded a settlement on 2,190 acres of land, which he called Montrelony, after a place in Derry, Ireland. Rogers referred to this childhood residence as Montalona, which was later renamed Dunbarton, New Hampshire. In 1740, the War of the Austrian Succession of 1740 to 1748 broke out in Europe, and in 1744, the war spread to North America, where it was known as King George's War. During Rogers' youth, in 1746, he saw service in the New Hampshire militia as a private in Daniel Ladd's scouting company, and in 1747 as a private in Ebenezer Eastman's scouting company, both times guarding the New Hampshire frontier. In 1754, Rogers became involved with a gang of counterfeiters, and he was unfortunately indicted, but the case was never brought to trial because it was during wartime.
Yeah, that sounds like a Ranger, honestly.
It does sound like a Ranger.
I have the utmost respect for Rangers, but a lot of them get in a lot of trouble. So.
Yes, we do. We sure do.
I'm going to go over the French and Indian War. So 1755, war kicks off between the French and British and their Native American allied counterparts. 1756, Rogers arrived in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, to begin recruiting soldiers for the British Crown. Fear the French supported attacks by Indians along the frontier assisted in his recruitment. So obviously, the military hasn't changed. They play on your fears and get you to sign up, and it works. So
it worked well because the British really did put the fear of God into the colonials with, they really exploited the making up stories about how horrific the Mohawks were and how much the French were doing horrible things, even though the British were doing plenty of their own horrible stuff. But yeah, they really did feed upon the fear of the colonials to booster the colonial ranks so that the British didn't have to fight with their own regulars.
Yeah, he had a lot of motivation behind it too. Rogers' brother Richard Rogers died of smallpox at Fort William Henry in 1757, and his corpse was dismembered and mutilated by hostile Indians.
Jesus.
So he had some motivation behind the hatred and the recruitment of other people to fight these savages. Oh, did I say that?
Savages.
That might not be politically correct.
That's all right. We don't worry about political correctness. We brought a Marine on.
Roger raised and commanded the famous Rogers Rangers and that fought for the British during the French and Indian War. The militia unit operated primarily in Lake George, Lake Champlain regions of New York. They frequently undertook winter raids against French towns and military emplacements, traveling on sleds, snowshoes, even ice skates across frozen rivers. Rogers Rangers were never fully respected by the British regulars, which that's normal. They fought not like anybody else, so they're not going to get the respect right away until later on in history.
Well, so me and Lou can attest to the fact that when you work in a unit that conducts unconventional warfare, you get treated differently from the regular military units, and that doesn't just take place in the 1700s in the colonies. Me and Lou both have seen regular Army units look down upon special operations, special forces, and treat us differently because we fight unconventionally. We have longer hair. We put our hands in our pockets.
Yeah, there's been multiple times where I've witnessed it myself. So I worked in different years in special operations and supporting. So there's a couple times where I was brought back to base from leave or something by a group of Rangers. They brought me in their Humvee with their no armor on it and no helmets on and stuff like that, and everybody was looking down on them, basically jealous because they had to wear all this gear. Stuff.
Jealous?
So, yeah. Rogers showed an unusual talent for commanding his unit in conditions where regular armies of the day were unaccustomed, and that's just part of that unconditional fighting and stuff like that. You can't live like everybody lives. In order to be unconventional, you have to be out and kind of be with this. You know, I mentioned savages before, but that's kind of how you have to be. You have
to go native.
You have to go native. Yeah.
And I think you can't understate the leadership ability of Rogers. I mean, this guy really knew how to appeal to the local people that he was talking to. He didn't talk down to his guys. He didn't have any of that British aristocracy built into him. He had built his own legend and his own leadership from the ground up, and he knew the people that he was in charge of. And I think that that had a lot to do with his ability to get these guys to fight in the manner that they fought and become the legends that they became.
Yeah, I mean, he wrote early guides for commanding, right, and kind of jotted down a lot of the leadership that he had, leading troops in the future, or leading soldiers or whatever in the future. And everybody can look at these rules or guides or whatever that he has, and it doesn't matter what branch of service. So I mean, it's just great leadership is great leadership. So.
Yeah, and the most popular one of these are the Robert Rogers 28 Rules of Ranging, which can be found in the opening pages of the U.S. Army Ranger Handbook. And as every single person that's ever served in the military knows, why do we do stand to at first thing in the morning, Marine?
Accountability.
Not just that, because stand to is during dawn, and that's when the French and Indians attack. And that is rule number 1 of Rogers' Rules of Ranging. The reason why we do stand to this very day is because of Rule 1 of Robert Rogers' 28 Rules of Ranging.
So Rogers' Rangers took part in much of the war and established their legend during the following battles and campaigns. So First and Second Battle of Snowshoes in 1757, Western Campaign 1759, and Pontiac's Rebellion 1763. Rogers had brought total dedication to his position as a commander of the Rangers and was often custom in the British and American armies. He had spent his own money to equip the Rangers when they needed to. Consequently, another word that's so big and I just can't read it, had gone into debt. In 1764, he was faced with the problem of repaying his creditors. And that sounds like every military member that I know for the most part.
Damn right it does. We're all broke. So in 1765, Rogers voyaged to England to obtain pay for his service and capitalize on his fame that he built during the French and Indian War. His journals and a concise account of the North America frontier were published. Immediately thereafter, he wrote a stage play called Pontiac, The Savages of America in 1766. Significant as an early American drama for its sympathetic portrayal of the American Indians. He obviously knew that they were savages, but he didn't look upon them as savages. He was sympathetic to their plight. He enjoyed some moderate success with his publications, and though Pontiac was condemned by the critics, it attracted royal attention. Upon his return to America, Rogers moved with his wife to the fur trading outpost of Fort Michilimackinac and began his duties as royal governor. During Rogers' absence, Amherst had been replaced by Thomas Gage as commander of the British forces in America. Gage was a bitter rival of Amherst, and Amherst, who liked Rogers, actually passed on that like of Rogers to being a disdain by Gage of Rogers. So Gage targeted Rogers and attempted to destroy both his legacy and his life during the times Rogers was searching for the Northwest Passage. Gage hired spies to intercept Rogers' mail and subordinated his subordinates. Unfortunately, Rogers offended his private secretary, Nathan Potter, and Potter gave Gage an excuse that he needed. Potter swore in an affidavit that Rogers said he would offer his province to the French if the British government failed to approve his plan of governance. Potter's claims were questionable. The French were not in any position to receive Rogers, with the British governor sitting in Montreal. Nevertheless, on the strength of Potter's affidavit, Rogers was arrested in 1767, charged with treason, and taken to Montreal in chains for trial. This trial was postponed until 1768. Elizabeth, carrying their only child, his wife, went home to Portsmouth. And his son became a lawyer in Portsmouth, and the family has then descended from that point to modern times. Gage accused Rogers of treason openly. Field Marshal Jeffrey Amherst was a close friend of Rogers, as we said, and was instrumental in vindicating him of Gage's charges of treason. Gage sent Rogers to Montreal to stand trial, but once there, Rogers was among friends, and due to Amherst's influence, Rogers was acquitted on all charges, and the verdict was sent to King George III for approval. The king approved, but they could not openly call Gage a liar, and so therefore Gage continued to stay in command, leading into the Revolutionary War. During the Revolutionary War, because of his legal troubles in England, Robert Rogers missed the major events and the disaffected colonies. He heard that the revolution was likely a breakout and returned to America in 1775. The Americans were out of touch with Rogers as he was with them, so they really didn't understand each other. Looking upon him as a noted Ranger leader and expecting him to behave as one, they were at a total loss to explain his drunken and litigious behavior. At that time, Rogers was perhaps suffering from alcoholism that blighted his later life and led to the loss of his family, land, money, and friends. So a Ranger getting out of control, becoming a drunkard, doesn't sound really right. I'm kidding. It sounds just about right. It's unclear exactly what transpired between the revolutionary leaders and Rogers. Rogers was arrested by a local committee of safety as a possible spy and released on parole, and that he claimed he would not serve against the colonies. He was offered a commission in the Revolutionary Army by the Continental Congress. He declined it on the grounds that he was a British officer. He later wrote to George Washington asking for a command, but instead Washington had him arrested. There's a lot of rumor as to whether or not he was actually working on behalf of the British at this point, trying to get a command with Washington's men to spy on them. In 1777 of May, Rogers was forced to retire from the military on grounds of poor health, and returned home was now impossible. Hale's execution, Nathan Hale, and Rogers' raising of troops against the colonials seemed to confirm Washington's suspicions. And at Washington's prompting, the New Hampshire legislature passed 2 decrees regarding Rogers, one a good man and the other to divorce him from his wife on grounds that she had on grounds of abandonment and infidelity. Elizabeth, his wife, could not afford any friendships or mercy towards Robert. If she expected to remain in New Hampshire later, Elizabeth married American naval officer John Roach, and she died in 1811. After a brief term in England, Rogers returned in 1779 to raise the King's Rangers in Nova Scotia for General Sir Henry Clinton. He was unable to keep the position due to his alcoholism, and his place was taken by his brother James. Now he was no further use to the British Army, and he was snared by an American privateer and spent time in prison in New York, escaping in 1782. In 1783, he was evacuated with other British troops to England. There he was unable to earn a living or to defeat his alcoholism. He died in obscurity and debt, with little money that had gone to pay on his rent. He was buried in London, but his gravesite has been lost, and no one knows where it is. So, Lou, what's some of the legacy of Robert Rogers?
John Paul Jones' ship during the American Revolutionary War was named USS Ranger in honor of Robert Rogers and his famous Rangers. A few early triumphs of the Continental Navy during the War of Independence were achieved by the Ranger. Under John Paul Jones' command, the famous ship would later witness the second salute to the American flag by a foreign country. On 30 May 2005, Memorial Day in the U.S., a statue of Robert Rogers was unveiled during a ceremony on Rogers Island at the in the Hudson River, 40 miles north of Albany, New York. This is near the site where Rogers penned his rules of ranging. And for those Marines that are listening, penned, it looks like it means wrote the rules of ranging. Rogers is mentioned respectfully in the Ranger Handbook, which is given to every U.S. Army Ranger. That was already repeated. I'm not going to keep on saying it. Yeah, obviously, the Rangers go by most of these rules. So,
even Ranger School is Camp Rogers in Fort Benning is what is named after him.
Yeah. And the handbook summarizes Rogers' principles of irregular warfare as presented in Robert Rogers' 28 Rules of Ranging. I'm not going to pronounce this.
Methuen High School.
Methuen High School in the town of which Rogers was born uses the Rangers as their mascot. I would like to have gone to a school that the Rangers were their mascot.
Hell yeah, that would have been awesome. Yeah. Actually, also, the NHL team, the New York Rangers, because it was New York, is named after Robert Rogers and the Rangers. In pop culture, Rogers' heroics in the French and Indian War are included in The Search for the Northwest Passage, and his later life are depicted in the novel Northwest Passage of 1936 by Kenneth Roberts. The novel inspired the 1940 film Northwest Passage, starring Spencer Tracy, who played Major Robert Rogers. The novel and film inspired the 1958 to 1959 NBC TV series called Northwest Passage, starring Keith Larson as Rogers. And Rogers is a central anti-hero in the 2004 AMC drama Turn, Washington Spies, and he is portrayed by Angus McFadden.
Ah, the famed Robert Rogers. What brings you here?
Her Majesty himself. Aye, I'm to raise a regiment.
A regiment?
The King's Rangers. I need my men to teach some rowdy privateers a lesson in death.
Long-range reconnaissance patrols and rangers directly take their legacy and derive their history from Rogers Rangers, despite the fact that they are not American military history, as much to the ignorance in members of these units and their knowledge. So, obviously, guys, for those of you who are left here, we had to have a couple guys jump out for some other stuff. Hearing that and knowing the legacy that Rogers has as far as the Rangers is concerned, it's a little bit impressive to realize that somebody who had such a tragic ending with alcoholism and all that kind of stuff really was somebody that has such an influence on modern day military culture.
Yeah, no, I honestly, we see this a lot, right? I've had leaders, I've had soldiers that are like amazing in combat, and honestly, just great leaders, but they have other issues that they're dealing with, and they usually try to mask it with alcohol, and like pretty much a lot of, I'd say 90% of the people that I hung around did and still do. So I mean, it's a natural thing.
I don't drink. I just want to put it out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a natural thing to, for guys that are getting out of the military and stuff to look back on and say, some of their best leaders were probably some of the worst people. Yeah. Like I've had
damaged at least. Yeah, people have struggled with addictions and struggled with personal demons.
Yeah, I had a lot of first sergeants and sergeant majors and stuff like that that would show up drunk somewhere and act crazy and do crazy stuff, but they were the most caring leaders and most as far as their military time, they were awesome. It's not surprising to me that that's a person that has that much leadership and influence on the Rangers themselves, but just to me, kind of like a special operations, irregular warfare per se. That doesn't surprise me at all.
No, not at all. And I think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that the way the British treated him, being that he was not a British regular. I think had he been treated a little bit more openly and accepted by the British aristocracy, he might have been set up a little bit more for success. What do you think?
I think that's definitely true with the way the British treat him. I'm just wondering, it's just crazy to me how much a non-American general can influence American military. Just the way that we just study his, I'm guessing, I don't know this personally, but the Rangers just studied his tactics and...
Yeah, his 28 rules of ranging are key to all Ranger stuff. If you ever been to Ranger school, it's the first thing you learn. And most of the stuff you learn in small unit tactics is based on Rogers stuff. So having said that, guys, I want to thank Nick. Obviously stepped out. He's no longer here, but Lou, hey, thanks for coming on, buddy. Obviously, you're going to be on again. I've got a show coming up with Lou that's going to be a full show. Myself and Lou are going to be going over one of the legends of Special Forces history. That'll be coming up. That'll be a surprise. Jeremy, thanks for coming on, buddy. I appreciate you coming out and under short notice, talking a little bit about the Marines and stuff like that. This is going to be a well-taken show. I'm sure people are going to love having us throw little bits of trivia out there, and hopefully we'll get together again. Maybe we'll plan it out a little bit more where we're not so short notice and have a little bit more time to do it. In the meanwhile, guys, remember that your entire life and everything you do is all up in your hands. Don't let anybody else tell you what you can and can't do. Do not put yourself in a cage with mental debilitating and doubting yourself. Remember to free the oppressed, de-oppress the bear, and we will see you guys next week.
Change Your POV and all of its shows can help and heal and even educate. We want you to help us help others. Visit our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/changeyourpov. Become a patron of our network and our mission.